We were all having a hard time. But I didn't think she was having such a hard time that was the only solution. I have to say I was shocked and I didn't handle it very well. And one time I came home and she was lying on the floor and she was crying and I said, well, can you get up? Because we got to go somewhere. We're going to be late and people are expecting us. And I'm sorry that you're having a crisis, but we have to go. I can't believe I did that. That was some crazy bad husbanding. Is that a word? Well, anyway, I wasn't being a good husband at the time, and I said to her later that I'll never forgive myself for it because I was a scumbag. I was nothing but dirt on the floor under her shoe for what I did to her. I deserve to be eaten alive by bats, rabid bats, and I deserve to have snakes crawl into my ears and live in my intestines for what I did to her.
Hello, how are you? Welcome to my channel. My name is Cheer Denise, and today we're doing episode 4 of the Harry and Meghan documentary from Netflix. In this episode, we are talking about the change and the shift that the media had for Meghan, seemingly out of nowhere. None of her friends seem to get what happened. And Meghan and Harry, of course, have their little paltry theory that they put forth. I think the problem is that there is enough truth to what they say that they've really been able to believe it themselves. But it is weird to me that they wouldn't try to enlighten any of their friends as to what happened before the Netflix documentary aired, because the friends' confusion, who all stepped up to speak on her behalf, seems unwarranted if Harry and Meghan know why this happened. Of course, we never get any explanation in this documentary about any of the actual criticisms of Meghan. I said this in the first episode. They keep glossing over the real questions and never addressing what people have said about various situations. In footage in which she has behaved in certain ways, they purposely cut out moments and minutes in which people raise an eyebrow at her behavior. We'll talk about that. There's a particular moment on her wedding day, actually. And they just keep glossing over the conversations that people are having and acting like they're putting forth their story. But wouldn't you want to answer some of the questions people have had in the retelling of your story? Isn't that kind of the point? You keep telling us all the things you've already told us before. Nothing in this documentary is new. None of it is anything different than they said in the Oprah interview. Nothing expounds upon. The only thing that's different is that some time has passed since the Oprah interview, so they have more stories to tell about their life post the royal family, but nothing that they're saying in this documentary addresses anything new that people have been talking about. And so that's why it's so boring. They're not giving us the background information. They're not answering any of the profound questions people have had. Even questions as simple as, so why did people say you were a bully? They never even address that. So it's real wasted time watching this documentary, but of course we're going to go through it. The previous episode had ended on their engagement and leading up to the wedding. So of course this episode is all about the wedding and about how they were such superstars that nobody could handle their star power. And that's ultimately why the kibosh had to be put on their glory, because they were just too cool. And that's how it's hard, you guys. It's hard to be so cool that the losers in the group, band together and douse your star. But that's what happened. We begin with Meghan explaining that their press secretary, who had worked for the Queen for 20 years, gave her this illustration that seems to have stuck with her, through the years. And the illustration was that it's like a fish swimming in the ocean, and it's a powerful fish, and it's swimming in a powerful current, and it's going in the right direction. And then suddenly an organism attaches itself to the fish, and the fish goes bleep. That was what Meghan did on bleep. And the fish doesn't like the organism. And it's like, what is that? And the fish wants to get the organism off. It doesn't move like us. It doesn't think like us. It doesn't act like us. Let's get it off. But what the fish doesn't know, but what it will learn eventually, is that organism makes it better, bigger, faster. And we just have to give that fish time to learn to love the organism. First of all, that is a lame analogy. And second of all, that you're a parasite. Whatever you need to tell yourself to get yourself through the day, but I can't say I would have found a whole lot of comfort in that particular analogy. Anyway, on to the wedding. Everyone still loves Meghan at this point, so we're not ready to talk about tragedy yet of the whole world turning on her, but don't worry, that's coming. And Meghan wants to let you know that she was calm. She makes a huge point about this. She says it like 4 times. I was so calm on my wedding day. I look back on it and I wonder, how was I so calm? How was I so calm? I don't know. I was so calm. And you kind of want to go, I guess that means she wasn't. I imagine she was quite the bridezilla on the day. And her need for you to believe that she was just this breezy, excited, bubbly bride that only wanted a croissant, a mimosa, and to play going to the chapel. That's all she wanted that day. She wanted to marry her man and get her mimosa and have her croissant and dance with her bridesmaids to go into the chapel. Go into the chapel and I'm gonna get mad. Oh, shut up. All right, so she has her little party with her bridesmaids and she's so calm throughout it all. She's just that kind of person. And she continues to be baffled by the fact that there are people there who are excited about the wedding. I'm like, were you in the country leading up to the wedding? I mean, could you not feel the mania? People love a royal wedding. And she says that she and her mom were in the car driving to the palace. And she wants to let you know that she's so normal that, like, even saying those words, driving to the palace, like, isn't that crazy? Driving to the palace for your wedding? I mean, I can't believe I'm saying that. Who even gets to say that? That is wild, wild stuff. But she and her mom are driving to the palace, and there were 115,000 people lining the 15-minute drive to the palace. And she is always so shocked. She's so shocked that people are invested in the story of her and Harry. I mean, she acts like she's shocked. I really don't think that she is. But she says that she just couldn't believe it. And her perpetual surprise at life as a royal is not endearing, because it's incumbent for you to understand the influence all your actions now have. For you to keep being like, oh my gosh, why are there so many people? What? Okay, you could maybe be surprised about that like the first time it happened. But have you never seen a royal wedding before? She's of the group of people that are continually telling you to educate yourself. Educate yourself. You just have to educate yourself. You need to know about other people's cultures. You need to understand. You need to understand. Do the work. Do the work. Okay, well, why don't you do the work, Meghan, of finding out what it is to be a member of the royal family and to find out how much influence you have. And you are about to get married. Maybe you could watch some tape of some old weddings if you've never seen a royal wedding, so you kind of like have an idea of how important this is. Not just how important it is for you, but how important it is for the people of that country to have this wedding to celebrate. No, we don't have an equivalent of that in America. So for you to keep, casting about for something that will help you understand what this is like from your American heritage, well, you're not going to find it. You're not going to have any reference point for this. So you need to find reference points there that you can, that will help you understand. Stop being so surprised by the culture that you're in and learn about the culture that you're in. Harry is just never making his point. Again, he talks a big talk, but I'm left being like, wait, but what's the point again? What's happening? And he says that, yeah, there's a lot of people who showed up. And of course, everyone had this expectation of a public wedding. Oh, we didn't want a public wedding, but of course we had to have one because, the Diana's boy is getting married. And of course they got William off, and so they have to get me off. And then they can just, sort of dust off their hands, job done. What are you talking about? Job done. Like, what is the point? What are you trying to say? Job done. Like, people are happy for you that you got married? Are you indignant that people wanted to celebrate you? Are you offended that people were excited that you had met the love of your life? I mean, explain to me why you're so annoyed that people are involved in this day. Job done. If you are a project, we have failed. What are you talking about, Harry? Okay, so he just wants to be sour. That's all there is to that. Then, of course, we get this weird gaslighting moment where they try to insist that she looked great that day and that her dress was all that it could be. No, it wasn't all it could be. I'm not even against the cut of the dress. I thought there was an elegance and simplicity to it that, I was fine with. Did I like Kate's dress more? Was it way more interesting? Was it just more beautiful on every single level? 100%. But at the same time, I could see what Meghan was going for, and I, there's a certain understated elegance to it. I can support that. But it was wrinkly. That was the problem. The fabric was a bad choice. and to have no kind of lace or overlay or anything on it to hide the fact that that very thick material was going to wrinkle horribly when she sat down, and then she'd stand up and look like a mess. And then you compound that with the fact that she decided to have a very PC hairstyle, which wasn't maybe super elegant. I think that it just lent this look of dishevelment. I thought the veil was pretty. And the thing is that I thought the look as a whole could have been so beautiful. I think the length of her veil and the way that, I mean, there's a lot of pictures that are actually really beautiful pictures of that day. So I'm not trying to just be a wet blanket, but I just think that it's one more instance where there was a lot of talk about the dress, a lot of talk about people not liking the dress or loving it or anything. And yet in the documentary, they have her getting out of the car, and they have her getting out of the car, and they have the designer, I guess, who designed the dress, talking about how they had so many conversations about how this moment needed to be, because it had to be stunning, it had to be beautiful, it had to be glorious. And, they leave it at that. And you're supposed to be watching this footage being like, oh, 100%, they managed it. This moment had to be stunning, it had to be glorious, it had to be wonderful. Well, it wasn't. Are you guys going to address the fact that it didn't quite hit the mark by many people's estimation? I guess not. But the other thing that really bothered me about this moment was there's a particular part when she gets out of the car where the man helping her out of the car was offering help, and she spurned his help. And so he refused to, help her get her veil out and everything. And it's written about in some detail in Revenge, and we talked about it in that book. The footage that they show from her getting out of the car is cut precisely at that point, so you don't see her actually finishing getting out of the car, and then we see her like right after. So they clearly didn't want to address that little kerfuffle that had happened on film. What is interesting is that as they're describing the wedding and the music and everything, obviously King Charles was a huge help in the process of picking out an orchestra and finding these unbelievable musicians. And the singer who sang when Meghan was walking down the aisle, I mean, perfection. So they're very complimentary about Charles throughout this. And of course they would be. He not yet at the point of the making of the documentary, but he would very soon be the king. So what are they going to do? Sit there and be ugly about him? They still need the power that he wields. In the presence of so much side-eyeing and negative talk about the royal family, it really stands out that they are being this complimentary about him. Okay, Harry says the weirdest thing at this point, and it was a real revelation into his selfishness. The interviewer says, when you saw Meghan walking down the aisle, what did you think? And you would expect him to say something like, she was so stunning, she was so beautiful, anything that husbands usually say when asked. And his response is weirdly childish and very selfish. And he says, well, what I thought was, look at me. Look what I got. Look what I found. Hello, what? Look at me. Look what I got. Look what I found. What I found? Not even who he found, but what. I just thought it was a weird way to express his excitement in the moment. A little childish, a little selfish. Nothing like she was so gorgeous, she was so beautiful. I mean, I suppose that's what he's saying. He can't believe that he fell ass backwards into this, but it was just a real revelation into the, simplicity of his small mind. And of course, Meghan, she can't resist an opportunity to compliment the two of them. It's always compliment to their love story. Please be jealous, okay? Because we're awesome and you're not. She says that, it was a big moment and I was just telling myself to just breathe, and it was going to be this wonderful and exciting thing. But of course, in the moment, it just felt like a lot of chaos, just because it was just so big and it was just like so much. And H and I are just really good at finding each other in the chaos. We meet our eyes or meet, and it's like, there you are. And here I am. And our souls are just able to mingle in a way that just is rare. But H and I can always find each other in the chaos. And it doesn't mean that all the things that are around us that are going on don't matter, because they do. But when we find each other, when our eyes meet, we tell ourselves it's just temporary. And that is how we've sustained ourselves. Finding each other in the chaos. It's big. Okay, well, let's talk about that gospel choir that Charles managed to put together for them. They want so much to criticize everything that has ever happened to them, particularly on the subject of race. And Harry says,
we had that gospel choir, and we actually didn't get very much pushback about it. I mean, hardly any at all.
And it's like, Harry, you didn't get a damn bit of pushback about that gospel choir, okay? Not even a little bit. So the fact that he'd be like, we actually didn't get very much. You didn't get any, okay? This wasn't even your idea. This was your dad's idea. And he took all the best singers from all these different gospel choirs and put them together in a choir called Kingdom Choir. And it's clear that it pains them that they can't act like this was their idea that they had to push and fight for. They know, and everybody else knows, that this ceremony, that they wanted to have, which was very different from any ceremonies that had happened before, was accommodated without problems. They wanted there to be a problem so bad so that they could act victimized, but they knew they couldn't. And of course, you get all her friends who were like, our eyes met as we listened to the gospel choir, and we were smiling because we knew what this meant. This meant that layers and layers and layers of racism were beginning to crumble. And the really beautiful thing is that Meghan wasn't even trying to make that happen. It was just her being her. Well, she didn't even have half these ideas, so I'm not sure if it was her being her. And I'm not sure, everyone's all excited that her culture is being represented. But what comfort is she gaining from the reference to her culture? Her culture that I'm like, were you growing up your whole life, singing in a gospel choir, going to church and listening to these kinds of messages from this pastor? Did you even go to church? What are we recalling by having these individuals here to represent your culture? Were you even representing your culture growing up? I don't know. Whatever. She can do what she wants. One thing I do want to say real quick, though, is that Serena Williams is in this documentary a lot. And Serena Williams was one of the first guests on her podcast. And Serena Williams is going to be at her baby shower later on in the episode. And in revenge, Tom Bauer went to some great length to minimize the relationship that he said they had. He poo-pooed the entire idea that they were actually friends. And for people who aren't exactly friends, Serena sure does show up a lot for Meghan. And so it does make me think that either this is a relationship of convenience in which they're both sort of scratching each other's back, or Serena really is Meghan's friend. And to that I say, why, Serena? I don't get it. But she does a lot of talking about what it was like to be at the wedding. And she was one of the people who was insistent that Meghan wasn't trying to break barriers. She was just being her authentic self. So I guess Serena's not a very good judge of character. Then they want to talk about St. George's Hall and how it was just so crazy. It was just so crazy, says Meghan. Every time Meghan talks, I feel like she is wanting to create this whimsical yet relatable moment where she describes just this silly and chaotic moment where just love is winning all over the place. And she wants you to know that they went to St. George's Hall and it was just so crazy. And everyone was like, what is happening? It was just so over top. H was cutting the cake with his sword. We're so wild. And then I didn't know where my mom was because she just jettisoned off to go watch Elton John on his stage. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Elton John is playing at my wedding. It was crazy. It's did you not know he was playing at your wedding? Was this a surprise to you? I just think so much of the descriptions that she gives, she's just baffled by her entire existence. Everything is just this fun surprise. She was just born yesterday. And so we get lots of that. And then she wants to let you know that she just wanted the music at the reception to be fun. And she was really excited about the music. She's super into the music that they played because they were so fun about the music. And she wants to tell you about their first dance because she picked out the music. She did. But then she can't remember the name of the song. And she's fumbling around for a good while trying to remember the song. I'm like, you guys have any editors around here? Maybe you just cut this whole part. But anyway, she never lands on the fact that the song they danced to was Land of a Thousand Dances. But she can remember parts of the song. And so she's singing parts of the song and, bip bopping in her seat. And Harry's like, that's right. That's right. It's really sort of an awkward little scene. But of course, it was all destined to fail because Haters. Her friend enters the picture we see a lot of this friend. I don't exactly know who this person is. I think it might be her friend Jessica from Canada. Jessica is near tears this entire episode because something was happening to my friend and I didn't know what to do. And the institution was insulating her. She says that the entire time that Harry and Meghan were together, whenever she and Meghan would text each other, they would always end their texts with love wins. Love wins, you guys, okay? You thought it was hate and evil, but actually it's love. And they were going to cling to that truth, and they were not going to let anybody steal the truth of that statement out of their mouths, you know? My question is, what are we fighting against? Who's trying to stand in your way? Who is a detriment to the love winning? Is anybody popping up out of closets being like, no interracial marriages? Is anybody, trying to get Harry's attention away from Meghan? Is anybody trying to steal Meghan away from Harry? What is the fight here? What dragon is breathing fire down their backs? What are we talking about? But you guys love wins, okay? And while you're at it, live, love, laugh. After they get done talking about their wedding and the fact that love wins, but there's this sort of foreboding in the background of, but not always, because there's going to be haters out there, we pivot inexplicably to their accommodations. I guess now the wedding's over, we're going to talk about where they're living. It's more like, let's just complain and complain and complain and complain and complain. But like, say it in a tender, sweet voice so that maybe you won't notice they're complaining. And they want to talk about Not Caught and how it just was insufficient. And no one would ever believe that they were living there. I'm like, yeah, nobody would believe it who is uneducated and stupid about what is given to a young royal couple. Meghan thought that Disney princesses were more than fairy tales. It isn't England's fault that living in a palace when you first get married isn't actually reality. And that the British royal family does have a budget. It's not just billions and billions and billions of dollars at your disposal, So she keeps being like, no one would believe it was actually happening and where we were living because it was a dump. And she doesn't actually say it like that, but it's weird because they can't even get a full sentence out of her. Like, we're supposed to just infer that it was yucky. But, they just keep playing clips of her saying phrases, not even full sentences. Well, they give us pictures, and we are supposed to do all the legwork here. H varnishing and me with a hoe. On a slant, such short ceilings, always bumping his head. And it's just obnoxious that they can't articulate themselves in this context because they know they're dancing on thin ice, complaining about palace accommodations. Well, palace adjacent, don't forget it was palace adjacent. Not in the palace, just on palace grounds. So basically we were in a tent. I mean, it was like, cute tent, but it was a tent. Their attitude sucks, this entire thing. And they also reveal that Oprah has some of the worst manners of anybody you've ever heard of. Apparently, Oprah showed up at their house for tea one afternoon. She comes in and sits down and goes, nobody would ever believe it. You know what, Oprah? You've had way too many years of being around people who have manners that it seems like you would have picked up some at some point. But how in the world are you going to walk into somebody's home and criticize it on any level? Who told you that that was appropriate in any context? No one would ever believe it. What a dump. You know what? Why don't you shut your face, you crazy lady? I can't tell if they are like kind of embarrassed that she would do that or if it made them brazen enough to speak about it. Like they're like, well, Oprah said it was junky, so I guess it is, and we can admit that we didn't like it either. I don't know. I would have been extremely offended by that. Even if I didn't particularly like the house, don't come into my home and criticize it, because what am I going to do about it now? Wow. You guys, what really bugs me? Let's just have a little chit chat. What really bothers me is when people criticize anything about anyone that they can't change in the next 5 seconds. It's like, oh, is the tag sticking out of the back of your shirt? Okay, tell me. Is there something in my teeth? Fine, tell me. My slip showing? Fine, tell me. But if I can't fix it in the next 5 seconds, don't tell me about it. Because what am I supposed to do about it? Just feel bad? Do you need a power trip? Anyway, Then we get into when Meghan got to spend some time with Queen Elizabeth, and she says it was a really nice time. And even though she was super respectful to the Queen, there was, in fact, this really sweet moment that she had where she could just look at Queen Elizabeth as this grandmotherly figure. And that's the way she treated her. I mean, of course, being very deferential to her because she is the Queen, but also she is a grandmother. And Meghan took care of her own grandmother in her grandmother's dying days. And so to have this grandmotherly figure was really important for her at that time. Oh, Meghan. As it turns out, it was the 1-year anniversary of the Grenfell fire that she was attending a ceremony about that with Queen Elizabeth. And so then that launches us into the whole Grenfell fire and how Meghan did a lot of work with those ladies. And I don't know exactly how much work she actually did. I've heard varying tales told. According to this documentary, Meghan was big friends with the ladies of the Grenfell fire. Apparently, there was this apartment building, quite poor, very filled with immigrants, and these buildings were not being properly taken care of. I don't know if they were like government projects or what exactly the housing situation was, but it would seem that it was something government related, because when the building burnt down, then all these people were placed in hotels for like 18 months, and they were just given vouchers for fast food and takeout. And so some of the women were tired of feeding their families on nothing but fast food, and they were looking to find some normalcy. And there really is something that is so comforting about being able to go into a kitchen and cook food that your family is familiar with and like comforting to them. And so the women went to this local mosque and asked if they could use the kitchen. So they did it about two times a week. And apparently Meghan found out about this, and so she jolted over with a camera crew to find out how the ladies were doing over there. And one woman who was really delightful, I liked her a lot, was telling all about the fire and about their use of the mosque kitchen and how they would go in and cook a bunch of food. She's telling about how Meghan came and Meghan, there was 50 women in there cooking, and each of them would give Meghan 3 kisses on the cheek, and how Meghan was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. I don't understand what kind of response that is. Doing this customary kiss with each of the ladies. Who would react that way? Wouldn't you just do it? Anyway, after she gets done with the customary kissing, then Meghan says that she wants to help, and she washes 5 kilos of basmati rice. And the woman telling the story was floored. I mean, just absolutely floored that Meghan would roll up her sleeves, put on an apron, and help in the kitchen. But what else would she do? Did she come here to watch you work? That's awkward. And that's great that she washed the rice. But any member of the royal family, I think, would have done something similar. I always see William and Catherine, getting their hands dirty with whatever activity is they're doing. Like, Meghan didn't break the mold by washing some rice. And it was certainly a nice photo opportunity for her. Now, Meghan says that she went and visited these women at the kitchen all the time. Like, she was just hanging out down at the kitchen 24/7. And she got to know these women really, really well. And she asked them, why don't you guys do this every day of the week? Why do you only get to come down here 2 times a week? And they said they couldn't afford it. So then Meghan says that it was her idea to do this cookbook to raise money. And so she worked for 9 months on this cookbook. And then they had this and then they had a ceremony on the grounds of Kensington Palace to announce the cookbook and to tell the whole world about it and all of this. And I guess the cookbook sold pretty well. Okay. I don't know if I can't remember what I've read about this whole scenario. I mean, I've read lots and lots of people being like, oh, so she lost some rice. She shouldn't get that much credit for it. I don't know exactly how many times she was visiting these women. I've always gotten the impression that she used them for a photo op and for the launch of a charity that sounded within her wheelhouse, helping women of color. But I don't know if she really was that involved. She certainly didn't have anything to do, really. It would have been within her ability to visit them quite frequently if she really wanted to, but I don't know. They seem to speak of her pretty highly, though. So who knows? So I'm going to leave off of that because I don't know enough about that scenario. I just know how she typically works in charities. And I know that she typically uses the people in the charity to bolster her image. And then once she's done getting enough credit for it to increase her reputation as a charitable person, she kind of leaves off of it. So I'm just going by what I know of her character, though this documentary didn't really give us any information. And it wouldn't have. It hasn't given us any information about anything. Okay, let's talk about how they're just so awesome at touring. Everyone loved Meghan. Meghan. That's all anybody wanted. She was on the cover of every magazine, every newspaper. Everyone had Meghan fever. And they're so proud of themselves for how well they did with the touring. Meghan and Harry just can't get enough of how awesome they are. And then, of course, Meghan has to say, well, I mean, of course, we were getting so much done, but it got even harder when I was pregnant. And then, of course, we have to talk about, yes, they were pregnant. They always wanted to be parents. Harry's like, I always wanted to be a dad. Yeah, I always wanted to be a mom. So, shocker there. The married couple gets pregnant. They are so enchanted by their whimsy because they referred to Meghan's belly as the bump. Isn't that cute of us? We didn't steal that from the name of a magazine at all. And they're so fun that they don't even just say the bump. Sometimes they call it les bump because they're really fun. Whatever, you guys. They want to talk about how it could have been really hard because, what with morning sickness and all potentially getting in the way, but she did really, really well. And they don't say anything about Catherine, but of course we all know that Catherine has really hard pregnancies and that morning sickness has been really hard for her. So no, they're not saying Meghan did better than Catherine, but they want you to notice that she did. Then they want to talk about the Australia tour. They were just so popular, and it was while they were on that tour that her pregnancy was announced because Les Bump was showing. So, you got to let people know what's going on. She's not just fat, you guys, okay? On this tour, where apparently everything was going so great, that suddenly Meghan was being cut down in the prime of her life. Her friends are completely baffled. What happened? Why is she not popular anymore? And of course, we know that there was all kinds of shenanigans going on behind the scenes in Australia, and that she was throwing, I think, was it coffee, tea? She threw some liquid at somebody in a fit of rage, and, she was really showing her true colors. And potentially, it would stand to reason that some of her popularity being cut down is because she was a great big fraud, where in public we're getting constantly, this entire documentary is all of these shots of her hugging strangers in the walkabouts that she knew nothing of, and her just being so generous and kind and smiling and But the problem is people behind the scenes knew differently. And that was why it was so grating to them to see her rising in popularity all over the front pages of the newspapers. The newspapers are the ones who decided to print the pictures, right? It's not like the royal family was like, now print this one. They're making the decisions. And so potentially it was very annoying to the people who knew better to see her constantly being praised as this super kind, super charitable person when behind the scenes she is a train wreck and a nightmare. But Harry and Meghan want you to know that the real reason Meghan was cut down in the prime of life was because everyone was jealous of her. Everyone was jealous of Meghan. And she was doing so well, and you'd think people would be proud of her, but no, of course not, because the snakes higher up in the hierarchy can't handle it when somebody else is popular who wasn't born to be so popular. It's only people who are born into it who should be so popular. It's like, but Harry, aren't you born into it? Aren't you one of the primary players here in the show? What's wrong with you being popular? But apparently it needs to be William and Catherine, and it needs to be Charles and Camilla, and Harry and Meghan are supposed to just hang out and be quiet in the background. And they're very offended by this reality, but I think, well, son, it is a hierarchy. So if you don't like that, if you don't like having to play that game, you want to be as popular as you want to be, then break away, which eventually, of course, they end up doing. But you can't manage to be this popular when you have nothing to contribute. And neither do you and Meghan have anything to contribute. So if you break away, you're going to have to come up with your own plan on how to get noticed. And that's way harder than just being part of this institution that you criticize 24/7. But their big theory is that William and Catherine's teams and his father's teams began to ask the press to downgrade Meghan's role and to make sure that they didn't print so many stories and that they would trade different stories to the press. Well, if you won't print that one about Meghan, we'll give you this story instead to print. I don't know if that's how things work. He says he knows all about it. I don't think that the royal family has so much power that they're running the newspapers and they're running the tabloids. And if they had the ability to do that, then what are all these negative stories that have come out about Camilla? What were all the negative stories that were coming out about Catherine? The royal family does not have the ability to change what the press says about them. I mean, Harry's the one that's always complaining about the press, saying that they're writing horrible, mean stories about him. Well, if the royal family has the power and the ability to change the narrative, why weren't they ever changing it in his favor? Why were they letting the press talk about how he was drunk and disorderly when he was younger? It's ridiculous. But of course he has to bring his mother into it. And he says,
well, my mother had the same problems as Meghan. She was just too popular, and that's why she had such a hard time.
And then, of course, we get Diana in her Bashir interview, and she's saying, well, it was hard when we were in Australia because everyone was crying to come to my side of the street. There she is, and everyone wanted to be on my side. And of course that's very hard for my husband because, if you're a proud man, and my husband is a proud man, and you hear for 4 weeks straight that they want me instead of him, it makes you feel a bit low, and he felt a bit low, and it was very hard. And I don't particularly want that kind of popularity because, of course, it breeds a lot of jealousies, and that was really hard, and it made a lot of very hard situations because of that popularity. So no, I didn't look for it, and I didn't want it. Okay, well, Meghan does look for it, and she does want it, and they tried to make it seem as though Meghan was so ashamed to be on the front cover because she felt so bad that the other people weren't getting their light, and Harry's over there trying to comfort her, saying it's not your fault, you're just my mom all over again, and wringing his hands about what that might mean. And they want to put forth all these different stories saying Catherine and Meghan could do the same things, and Catherine was lauded in the press and Meghan was demonized. Okay. Well, you know what? The other day I was watching this reel, and they were showing all these times when Meghan had broken royal protocol. But even in that reel, I thought to myself, well, I've seen Catherine do those things too. Like an off-the-shoulder dress was really supposedly scandalous when Meghan wore it and people criticized for it. But I've seen Catherine wear lots of dresses where it's like one shoulder dress. And I've seen Catherine without her shoes on at various events when you were supposed to take your shoes off, in another country. And apparently it was real clunky when Meghan took her shoes off in the sand at Bondi Beach. Well, is that like super offensive? Like, who cares? And all of these times, one time Catherine was eating avocado toast, but then when Meghan was eating avocado toast, people said, didn't she care about the fact that avocados are, I don't know, something about the growing of the avocados was not good for the environment or something. They were cutting down other things to grow avocados because people are obsessed with avocado. And so Meghan was somehow criticized for avocado toast when Catherine was encouraged to eat avocado toast. And so it's all these really petty things. And what I think is, even I have thought to myself that it does seem like Catherine can do a thing and then Meghan does similar things and people are like, oh, she broke protocol. But I'm like, oh, I don't know, because Catherine is pristine in everything she does, and she did something similar. So I can see why they say that Meghan was criticized for doing a thing. I think the thing is people don't like Meghan, and so they want her to have made a mistake. But there is a reason why people don't like her. They don't like her because she's foul and hateful, and she's a bully behind the scenes, and she's a fake to everyone's faces and acts like she's never done anything, and she's manipulative. So when you are a difficult person to like, one-on-one, people don't want to go out of their way to give you a pass on things. Is it petty and small for people to criticize one person when they don't the other? Yeah. If Meghan really thinks that she's never done anything wrong, then she needs to go out of her way to be above board and lovely to everybody who has the power to write something negative about her. If that's too much trouble for her and she's unwilling to do it, then she can continue to enjoy really negative stories about her. Then, of course, we have to get the people who say that this is all race-related. I'm so sick of that narrative. I went into it hard on the last episode, and so I just don't have the energy or the wherewithal to even want to discuss this. But there was, of course, people saying that these articles talking about Meghan being difficult and hard to get along with were just a dog whistle to racists because they just were pulling out the angry, controlling black woman trope. It's really, come on. And then they wanted to say that the mosque that she had been associated with the Grenfell fire was related to ISIS. So then there was like, is Meghan a potentially friend with terrorists? Anybody who would read an article like that and think that's true. Come on. And Meghan says that, of course, she didn't believe any of the tabloids because why would you? Okay, you guys, I know that is all some fake news. And I knew nobody else was. But then one time I had to go to one of those, what do you say it? How do you say the word? walkabout. I went on a walkabout, and there was this lady who said that what I was doing to my dad was wrong. And then I knew. I mean, it was a heart-stopping moment for me. I knew that people were actually believing the trash they were reading, and it was devastating to me. So, of course, then what she needs to then do, if people are going to believe that trash, she's got to go get her friends together to write their own article. Now, you were led to believe in this documentary that Meghan's friends came together through the love in their own hearts to have People magazine write this whole article about how awesome Meghan was, and all of her friends were involved, and all of her friends told People magazine that she was super nice, super awesome. Her whole goal in life is just to live, laugh, love. And why does the world have to be so mean to her? And even that story is super glossed over too. You know, it's just they have a couple of friends saying they had this really fun idea to do a really fun thing for Meghan to really help her out in her sad and hard times. So they get together about that. But meanwhile, it doesn't matter that her friends got together to have them write a spread about her. No. She's in the depths of despair. And Meghan is inconsolable. And there's only one thing for it. She's going to have to do away with herself. Because no one has ever had to live this hard life that she's living, and no one can understand it. But worse still, no one will get her any help. And since no one will get her any psychological help, there's only one way out of this. Okay. I can't say it any more than I've already said it in every other video I've ever done. Meghan, you lie. You lie like a dog. There is nobody that would be more supportive of her getting some psychological help than Charles himself, who has a myriad of his own therapists that he sees. And the royal family has never been opposed to talking to a therapist. They have encouraged it. And Diana had so many therapists and interventionists and health specialists that it boggles the mind. So for Meghan to actually try to tell us that she was flipping out, asking for help, and nobody could, bestir themselves to get her some medical professionals and some mental health professionals is so stupid. It's like such a dumb lie. That's like me going out and being like, one day I went outside and all the trees and all the grass in the whole world were gone. You don't remember that day? Well, you must have been sleeping through it, but it did happen. That's such a lie. What are you talking about, Meghan? No one would help you. Just like, if you're going to lie, at least construct a lie that could be believable. It's so sloppy. I'm not encouraging people to be liars, but if you're going to lie, just be a little bit better at it. Harry is devastated that this is happening to her because he's like,
no, we were all having a hard time. But I didn't think she was having such a hard time that was the only solution. I have to say I was shocked and I didn't handle it very well. And one time I came home and she was lying on the floor and she was crying and I said, well, can you get up? Because we got to go somewhere. We're going to be late and people are expecting us. And I'm sorry that you're having a crisis, but we have to go. I can't believe I did that. That was some crazy bad husbanding. Is that a word? Well, anyway, I wasn't being a good husband at the time. And I said to her later that I'll never forgive myself for it because I was a scumbag. I was nothing but dirt on the floor under her shoe for what I did to her. I deserve to be eaten alive by bats, rabid bats, and I deserve to have snakes crawl into my ears and live in my intestines for what I did to her.
Meghan's mom also does a lot of fake crying and dabbing at non-existent tears rolling down her face, saying that, yes, it was very strange when Meghan came to me saying that she wanted to end her life. You are always sad when you hear of your child feeling so badly. But, I knew she was going through a lot. Doria's response to the whole thing is really weird. I mean, it feels like she's putting on such a weird show of being sad. But it really, I don't believe any of it. It's just very hard to believe what it is that's happening with Doria. And you get the sense that she's play acting a person who experienced their daughter coming to them in desperation, but you don't totally get the feeling that it really happened. Meanwhile, Meghan is throwing herself around on the floor and Harry's wringing his hands about what a demonic person he turned out to be. the offices of the two couples, William and Catherine and Harry and Meghan, are decidedly divided. They can't stand each other. They won't stand each other, and it's over. And the previous facade of the four of them getting along has completely shattered, and their offices are being divided because Harry and Meghan's people won't work with William and Catherine's people. It really came to light at Christmas time, and they were going to do this Christmas party, and it was going to be everybody's offices together, and it very quickly dissolved into two separate parties. Everyone is now becoming aware of the fact that the four of them just don't get along, and they can't even keep it secret anymore, which means it must have been pretty outrageous. It was so explosive and there were so many people involved that people are beginning to talk, and the news is starting to come out that Meghan is extremely difficult and mean. And so Harry and Meghan can say that they are receiving all this backlash because Meghan is so popular, but she's receiving backlash because the people who are involved in building her up can't do it anymore. Meghan is insistent that she couldn't even text her friends. She wasn't allowed to send anybody pictures of anything. Obviously, as you know, she's still very pregnant, and so she'd like to send her friends pictures and information about it, but the stupid institution won't let her. And of course, you obey, you do what you're told to do, but the whole time you're just asking yourself, why? And I was just beginning to live in this smaller and smaller and smaller world, and I was turtling. That's what Meghan says. She says she was turtling. Is that a phrase that I'm unfamiliar with? I guess it means that you are going into your shell. Her friends who had rallied together to run to People magazine and tell all about how Meghan was just loving, living, and laughing, and why couldn't anybody just love her for it? They decided to come together and throw her this baby shower. And Meghan wants you to know that it was just a bunch of gal pals doing a really sweet thing for her. And she flew there, and they just made her feel so loved and so seen and so wanted, when, of course, the whole world hated her. So to have this group of friends do this for her, yes, she flew in George Clooney's jet, but that's just what friends do for each other. They lend you their jets. And it was hard for her because the media just ruined this really intimate party that her friends had put on with their own money. Okay. Yes, I know you heard there was endorsement deals and all sorts of gifts given in the manner of influencers receiving free things. But actually her friends did use their own money. So, don't believe any of those articles that said that, there were all of these gift bags and stuff where people were literally leaving the shower with massive pieces of luggage stuffed with all kinds of free gifts. That actually had nothing to do with the baby shower. We were showering the baby. I got some onesies and diapers. So that's what that was about. And I guess it just happened that everyone had the exact same luggage when they left. But it was all about onesies and diapers and, fun little shower games. Then we find out they get to go to move to Frogmore Cottage. The days of not caught are over. The baby is born. And then, of course, we have to talk all about how there was the kerfuffle that Meghan wouldn't be seen on the steps in front of the brown doors like everybody else had ever been. Meghan says the thing is that it was just that she didn't want to leave her doctor. Her doctor was at this other hospital, and she had this long-standing relationship with that doctor, and so that's the doctor she was going to use. And when she suggested that they take the pictures at that hospital, everyone acted like it was a complete and total inconvenience, and they couldn't block off the traffic there, and it was going to block the emergency exit, so they couldn't do it there. But then she said she'd give them more time at the palace if they wanted, and nobody said that was going to be a problem. And then all of a sudden, when she had the baby, everyone acted like it was this big, stupid thing. And then when the press came to the palace, like 2 days later, the baby was only 2 days old. Everybody acted like it was super lame. But the thing is that, Meghan, it wasn't that you didn't come out and show your baby on the step. And then Harry is the one who came out and kind of bumbled the announcement in a weird way. It wasn't the fact that you came out 2 days later with the palace and the baby. It's that you acted as though people were trampling all over your rights as a human being for wanting to see your baby. That was the problem. You let it be known that you felt you were not obliged to share your child or his name or anything about him. And when your arm was twisted, you agreed to bring the baby out. But you guys, look, I don't swim in the waters of Meghan's fake pregnancy conspiracy theory. I don't know anything about that topic. And I don't think I care enough about Meghan to ever go down that place. I mean, are there a lot of suspicious things? Surely there are. The description alone of him having his kid in the book that he wrote in Spare is so unhinged and so unlike any birth I've ever seen, or of the three I experienced, nothing he describes was like what you actually go through. That it certainly made me wonder, had he ever been in a delivery room? But all that aside, I just want to say that baby they brought out to show us was not even a human baby. It seemed like a doll. It didn't move at all. And I know that we're supposed to believe that it was asleep, but like there's two things. One, the skin color of that baby was significantly darker than Archie's skin has ever been in any picture I've ever seen of that child. So like I've heard about children who are mixed whose skin is lighter when they're born and darkens over time, but I've never seen where the skin is darker but then gets lighter. I've never heard of that. And the child did not move. Even when Meghan's like touching its head, it's like yes, its eyes are closed, but you never saw any blinking, nothing going on. So I think the baby we saw was a doll. Anyway, the whole world was so mean to them, especially that one loser who showed a picture of a chimp dressed up and said that the royal baby had finally come out and been announced. And that was super hateful and racist. I don't even have the energy to pick that apart. The guy was just being stupid. He didn't mean it. And for them to just comb through all of this information and all of these articles and all this online trash so that they can be wounded, what does that say about them? That they would rather be hurt than well. They would rather be wounded than live a healthy mental life. I don't get it. Then we get introduced to Lauren, their nanny, who seemed really lovely. She was of African descent. I think she was from Ghana. We get all this information about when she came to their house to be interviewed to take care of the baby, because when Doria left after staying with them for a month, they needed help with their baby. How are they going to take care of this baby on their own? So they hired a nanny, and the woman says that Harry and Meghan were so relatable that she rolled up and she had just gone to buy new shoes and everything, and there Harry is wandering the property with no shoes on at all, and she just liked them immediately, and she said that they were good parents and really involved in all of this. So we give it Lauren's take on it. Lauren wanted to carry the baby on her back with a mud cloth, and they just were delighted by that. They thought that was so fun and cool, and Harry acts out how the baby was stretched around her back asleep, and they're so delighted that they have found a way to add whimsy into their lives through Lauren, who wants to tie her baby to her back with a mud cloth in her traditional way. And they are just so delighted with themselves that they love the idea. They think they're so fun that they were cool enough that she would just tie that baby on her back, and they weren't like worried about it or anything like that. I mean, I wouldn't be worried about it either, but that's the thing. Why were they so low on things that they could add to this documentary that they have to make this big thing about how cool they were with Lauren tying the baby to her back while she got things done around the house? And we're supposed to like applaud them or think they're so cool for being good with this. All right, we're almost done. Don't worry. I know. I'm tired. You're tired. The South Africa tour. So it's time for them to go on tour with their baby. Meghan is unable to understand that people are watching her. She's really upset by all this coverage about her. So you would think that she realizes that she is hugely significant for whatever reason in the media, whether positive or negative. The stories are always about her. So for her to constantly be startled and shocked that people are watching her, why do you think you're always on the covers of the magazines and the newspapers if people don't want to know what's going on with you? So she goes on this tour and she says that it was really wearing and tiring. She's a newlywed, also a new mother. And they were making a documentary about them while they were doing this tour. And she says she thought it was just supposed to be this sort of like bubblegum sugar-coated little documentary about what they were doing, and she didn't think it was going to be a hard-hitting documentary at all or anything like that. And the purpose of the documentary was just to talk about this tour. It wasn't really to tell the truth, because nobody ever wants to tell the truth, you know. And Meghan had been telling everybody for a while she was going to bring light to the monarchy, and she was going to shed light on this really dusty institution. She'd been saying that. But of course, nobody really cared about the fact that that's what she wanted to do. And they were trying to put their boot on her neck to shut her up. So she thought she could just pretty much say whatever. But as it turns out, when somebody came and talked to her about what was really happening in her life, and she told the truth, they decided to air that. But she just couldn't believe that that became like the story. Why would anybody make a big deal about that? Meghan wants you to believe that this interview that she did was off the cuff. She hadn't thought about it. She was simply answering his question. But what I think is very telling is that as she reminisces about that particular interview, she says that she was shocked that it became such a big deal, but that because she hadn't been necessarily specific in what the hard was, everybody was able to apply that to themselves and really connect on the fact that life is just really hard. Like, girl, you're trying to tell me that this was a really meaningful thing for so many people because they could apply it to themselves. You weren't specific because you have not been specifically oppressed. There was nothing specific for you to say. And you knew that you wanted to complain and pretend to be oppressed. And there's enough people out there just like you who love to marinate in victimization that they loved to hear you complain, because then they thought that that gave them an excuse to complain too. You and your compatriots all want to complain inexplicably and without articulation about what all your problems are. But that kind of ended the episode with them talking about how she is now being attacked for having feelings, and how the whole world was wondering what in the world was going on with her, and everyone was aghast. Okay, that is where I'm going to end things. We will be doing some more episodes later. I apologize for getting this out so late. As some of you may have seen, who follow me on Instagram and who may have seen my post in our community tab, we're moving, and oopsies. And this is also the last week of school for me. So I've just been really busy, but I'm going to try to get these out a little bit more frequently, especially as the summer comes and I have less to do. All right, I'll see you guys later. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.